A young boy named Sam is about to witness an event that will change his life and the lives of others around him. What starts as a routine afternoon at the park takes an unexpected turn when Sam notices a young girl, Lisa, and her guardian, Mr. Harris, behaving in a way that makes him uncomfortable. His concern for Lisa's well-being sets off a chain of events that leads to a dramatic intervention by the authorities. But what was it about this seemingly ordinary day at the park that prompted such a significant response? Stick around to find out. But before we get started, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're moved by this story of bravery and transformation, don't forget to subscribe. The sun was just beginning to dip in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the neighborhood as Sam made his way to the local park. This was his favorite time of day, a moment when the streets were filled with the laughter of children, the distant hum of cars, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. At 12 years old, Sam was a creature of habit, and his daily ritual involved kicking around his soccer ball in the park after school. It was his way of unwinding, of letting go of the day's worries, and simply enjoying the game he loved. Sam wasn't the type to get into trouble. In fact, most people would describe him as a cautious and thoughtful child. He had a keen sense of awareness, always paying attention to what was happening around him. His parents often told him that he was more mature than other kids his age, and he took that as a compliment. After all, being cautious meant he could avoid unnecessary problems, and he liked it that way. As he reached the park, Sam noticed that it was unusually quiet for a weekday afternoon. A few kids were scattered across the playground, some on the swings, others playing tag, but overall, the park had a serene and peaceful vibe. He spotted an empty patch of grass near the benches, where he usually practiced his soccer drills, and quickly made his way there. After setting down his backpack and pulling out his worn-out soccer ball, Sam began his routine. He dribbled the ball back and forth, practicing his footwork with intense concentration. His thoughts drifted, allowing the repetitive motion of his feet against the ball to take over. The world around him faded into the background, replaced by the familiar rhythm of the game. But it wasn't long before something caught his eye, something that pulled him out of his soccer trance. It was a girl sitting alone on one of the park benches. Sam slowed down, letting the ball come to a gentle stop as he observed her. She looked about his age, maybe a bit younger, with dark skin and curly hair that framed her face. She wore a pink jacket, even though the weather was warm, and her shoulders were hunched as if she were trying to make herself smaller. Sam hadn't seen her in the park before. He was pretty familiar with the regulars, the kids who played here every day, but she was new. He couldn't help but notice how sad she looked, her eyes downcast, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She seemed lost in thought, disconnected from the world around her. As he continued to watch her, Sam noticed a man standing a short distance away from the bench. The man appeared to be in his late 50s, with graying hair and a rugged face. He wore a wrinkled plaid shirt and jeans that looked a bit too big for him. His expression was tense, his brow furrowed in what seemed like frustration or anxiety. He kept pacing back and forth, glancing at his watch every few seconds. The man's restless energy made Sam uneasy, but he couldn't put his finger on why. Sam tried to go back to his soccer practice, but his eyes kept drifting back to the girl and the man. There was something off about the whole situation, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He didn't know why, but he felt a nagging sense of concern for the girl. It was as if she was sending out a silent plea for help, one that only he could hear. The minutes ticked by, and Sam continued to split his attention between his soccer ball and the pair on the bench. The man, who Sam guessed was the girl's guardian, seemed to grow more agitated with each passing moment. He muttered something under his breath, ran a hand through his hair, and finally pulled out his phone. After glancing at the screen, he stepped away from the bench to take the call, leaving the girl alone. That's when it happened. As the man walked away, the girl lifted her head slightly, her eyes scanning the park as if searching for something or someone. Her gaze eventually landed on Sam, who froze when he realized she was looking directly at him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, neither saying a word. Then, in a movement so subtle that Sam almost missed it, the girl raised her hand, making a quick, deliberate gesture. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't the kind of friendly signal that kids use to greet each other. No, this was different, strange, and deliberate. She formed a fist with her hand, then extended her thumb and pinky finger, holding it out towards him. Her eyes were wide, almost pleading, as she made the gesture, and then just as quickly, she lowered her hand and looked away. Sam's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what he had just seen. What was that? Was she trying to tell him something? He had never seen that kind of signal before, but the look in her eyes made it clear that it wasn't something casual. It felt urgent, important, like she needed him to understand something that she couldn't say out loud. He glanced over at the man, who was still on the phone, his back turned to the girl. Sam's mind raced. Should he go over and talk to her? Should he ask if she was okay? But what if he was wrong? What if the man saw him and got angry? The last thing he wanted was to get involved in something that wasn't his business. But then again, what if the girl was in trouble? What if she really needed help, and he did nothing? Confusion and worry churned in his stomach as he tried to decide what to do. Sam wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but the unease he felt was growing stronger by the second. He knew he couldn't just ignore it, couldn't just pretend he hadn't seen anything. He had to do something. The sound of laughter from a group of kids nearby jolted Sam out of his thoughts. He looked around the park, suddenly feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He needed to talk to someone who could help him figure out what to do. Sam grabbed his soccer ball and slung his backpack over his shoulder, casting one last glance at the girl on the bench. She was still sitting there, her hands back in her lap, her eyes fixed on the ground. The man had finished his phone call and was now pacing again, his agitation more apparent than ever. Without another second's hesitation, Sam turned and hurried out of the park, his mind racing with possibilities. He had to tell his mom. She would know what to do. She always knew what to do. When Sam got home, his mother was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The familiar smell of garlic and onions filled the air, but Sam barely noticed. His thoughts were still consumed by the strange encounter at the park. "Mom," he said, his voice a little shaky as he entered the kitchen. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" His mother looked up from the cutting board, noticing the serious expression on his face. She set the knife down and wiped her hands on a towel, giving him her full attention. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Sam took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. He didn't want to sound silly or paranoid, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "There was this girl at the park today," he began, choosing his words carefully. "She was sitting on a bench with this man, and I don't know, something about the whole thing just felt off." His mother frowned slightly, concern flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean, off? Was the man bothering her?" Sam shook his head. "I don't think so. It wasn't like that. He wasn't yelling or anything, but he seemed really agitated, like he was waiting for something, and the girl, she looked really sad. And then, when the man walked away to take a phone call, she made this weird hand signal at me. I don't know what it meant, but it didn't feel right." His mother's expression grew more serious as she listened. "What kind of hand signal?" Sam demonstrated the gesture as best as he could, mimicking the way the girl had held out her hand. His mother watched closely, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of it. "I've never seen anything like that," she admitted after a moment. "But if it made you uncomfortable, then maybe it's worth looking into." Sam felt a wave of relief wash over him. "You think so? I wasn't sure if I was just overreacting." His mother shook her head, her voice calm but firm. "You did the right thing by telling me, Sam. It's always better to be safe than sorry. I'll call the police and let them know what you saw. They could check it out and make sure everything is okay." Sam nodded, feeling a bit better now that his mom was taking action. He still couldn't shake the image of the girl's sad eyes and the strange hand signal, but at least he knew he had done what he could. As his mother picked up the phone to call the police, Sam quietly left the kitchen, his thoughts still lingering on the girl in the park. He hoped that she was okay, that maybe he had just misread the situation. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was very, very wrong. That night, as Sam lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the events of the afternoon. The image of the girl's face, her silent plea, kept replaying in his mind. He tossed and turned, unable to find peace, his thoughts spinning with worry and doubt. Eventually, sleep took over, but even then, his dreams were haunted by the memory of the park, the girl on the bench, and the strange hand signal that he still didn't fully understand. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Sam's bedroom, but he was already awake, lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't slept well, his mind still occupied by the strange events of the previous day. The image of the girl on the park bench, her sad eyes, and the unsettling hand signal she had made kept replaying in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Downstairs, he could hear the faint sound of his mother talking on the phone. He knew she was calling the police, just as she had promised. The thought made him feel a little better, but the anxiety in his chest didn't go away completely. After what felt like forever, Sam heard his mother's footsteps coming up the stairs. She knocked gently on his door before opening it, giving him a reassuring smile as she stepped inside. "I spoke with the police," she said, sitting down on the edge of his bed. "They're going to send some officers to the park today to check things out." Sam nodded, a mix of relief and worry swirling inside him. "Do you think they'll find her? The girl, I mean?" His mother gave him a thoughtful look. "I don't know, Sam, but they're going to do their best to make sure she's okay. You did the right thing by telling me. Now it's up to them." Sam appreciated her words, but the uncertainty still gnawed at him. "I just hope she's not in trouble," he said quietly. "We'll know soon enough," his mother replied, giving his shoulder a comforting squeeze. "Why don't you get dressed and have some breakfast? You'll feel better once you've eaten." Sam nodded again, though he wasn't sure how much better he'd actually feel. But he didn't want to worry his mother any more than he already had, so he got up and started getting ready for the day. Later that morning, two police officers, Officer Stevens and Officer Martinez, arrived at the park. They were both experienced and well-versed in handling situations that involved children, and they approached the task with the seriousness it deserved. The park was lively as usual, with children playing and parents chatting on benches, but Officer Stevens quickly spotted Lisa and Mr. Harris sitting on the same bench where Sam had seen them the day before. The officers exchanged a quick look, then approached the pair, their expressions professional but friendly. Mr. Harris noticed them coming and immediately tensed up. He had a habit of expecting the worst whenever he saw the police. His past experiences with law enforcement had rarely been pleasant, and he couldn't imagine why they would be approaching him now. "Good morning, sir," Officer Stevens said as they reached the bench. "I'm Officer Stevens, and this is Officer Martinez. We're just here to ask a few questions." Mr. Harris's brow furrowed, his body language defensive. "Questions? What kind of questions?" Officer Martinez stepped forward, her tone calm and reassuring. "Nothing to worry about, sir. We received a call from a concerned citizen about something they saw in the park yesterday, and we're just following up. Is this your daughter?" Mr. Harris hesitated, glancing at Lisa, who was sitting quietly beside him. "She's my niece," he said after a moment. "What's this all about?" Officer Stevens noticed the tension in Mr. Harris's voice and tried to keep the situation as relaxed as possible. "We just want to make sure everything's okay. Do you mind if we talk to your niece for a moment?" Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into his expression. "Why do you need to talk to her? She hasn't done anything wrong." "We understand that, sir," Officer Martinez replied, her voice still soothing. "We just want to make sure she's all right. It'll only take a minute." Lisa had been listening to the conversation quietly, her hands folded in her lap. When she heard the officers asking to talk to her, she looked up at her uncle. Mr. Harris sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but he nodded reluctantly. "All right," he said gruffly, "but I'm staying right here." Officer Stevens smiled politely. "Of course, sir. We'll just step over here to give her some privacy." Mr. Harris watched as the officers led Lisa a few steps away from the bench, far enough that they could talk without being overheard, but close enough that he could still see her. His jaw clenched as he tried to keep his temper in check. He hated feeling scrutinized like this, but he didn't want to make things worse for Lisa by causing a scene. Officer Martinez knelt down, so she was at eye level with Lisa, giving her a kind smile. "Hi, Lisa. I'm Officer Martinez, and this is my partner, Officer Stevens. We just want to make sure you're okay. Is that all right?" Lisa nodded slightly, her eyes darting between the two officers. She felt a bit nervous, but something in Officer Martinez's gentle demeanor made her feel safe enough to talk. "We heard that you made a hand signal yesterday," Officer Stevens said softly, picking up where his partner left off. "Can you tell us about that? What did it mean?" Lisa hesitated, her mind racing as she tried to decide what to say. She had been taught by her father that the signal was only to be used in emergencies, but this felt like one of those times. The memory of her father flashed in her mind, and she felt a pang of sadness. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's something my dad taught me," she said. "He said if I ever felt scared or in danger, I should make that sign. It means I need help." Officer Martinez's heart went out to the little girl standing in front of her. She kept her expression calm, not wanting to alarm Lisa, but inside, she felt a deep concern. "Were you feeling scared yesterday, Lisa?" she asked gently. Lisa nodded again, her eyes dropping to the ground. "Uncle Harris, he's really angry a lot. He yells a lot, and sometimes he scares me." Officer Stevens exchanged a quick look with Officer Martinez, the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. "We're here to help, Lisa," he said. "Can you tell us more about why you're scared? Has your uncle ever hurt you?" Lisa shook her head quickly. "No, he doesn't hit me or anything. But he's always mad, and I don't know what to do. I miss my mom and dad." Officer Martinez felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to the little girl's confession. "I'm so sorry, Lisa," she said softly. "That must be really hard for you." Lisa nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "It is. I just want things to be normal again, but they're not. Uncle Harris tries to take care of me, but he's always upset. I don't think he knows how to handle it." The officers listened carefully, taking in everything Lisa was saying. It was clear that Mr. Harris wasn't physically abusive, but the emotional toll on Lisa was significant. They needed to handle the situation delicately to make sure both Lisa and her uncle got the help they needed. "Thank you for telling us, Lisa," Officer Stevens said gently. "You're very brave for speaking up. We're going to talk to your uncle now, but I want you to know that we're here to make sure you're safe." "Okay." Lisa wiped her eyes and nodded, feeling a little bit better knowing that someone was listening to her. Back at the bench, Mr. Harris was watching the conversation with growing anxiety. When the officers returned with Lisa, he stood up, his body tense with anticipation. "What did she tell you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We had a good conversation," Officer Martinez said, keeping her tone neutral. "She told us that you're her uncle and that you've been taking care of her since her parents passed away. Is that right?" Mr. Harris sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Yeah, that's right. My sister and her husband died in a car accident a few months ago. Lisa came to live with me after that. It's been a rough time." Officer Stevens nodded, his expression understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Harris. That must have been incredibly difficult for both you and Lisa." Mr. Harris rubbed a hand over his face, the frustration evident in his voice. "It has been. I'm doing the best I can, but it's not easy. I've got my own problems to deal with. And now I'm responsible for a little girl. I never wanted this, but what choice did I have?" "We understand," Officer Martinez said gently. "It sounds like you've been under a lot of stress. And that's why we're here, to make sure you both get the support you need." Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed slightly, his defensive instincts kicking in. "What are you saying? You think I'm not taking care of her? You think I'm hurting her?" "No one's accusing you of anything, sir," Officer Stevens interjected calmly. "We're just concerned about the situation. Lisa mentioned that she's been feeling scared and that you've been angry a lot. We know this is a tough time for both of you, but we want to make sure that Lisa feels safe and supported." Mr. Harris looked down at his niece, who was standing quietly beside him. His expression softened for a moment, a mix of guilt and helplessness crossing his face. "I'm not trying to scare her," he muttered, "but everything's just so damn hard right now. I'm not good at this parenting stuff." Officer Martinez saw an opening and gently pressed on. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed, Mr. Harris. Parenting is never easy, especially under these circumstances. But there are resources out there that can help you. Maybe some counseling or a support group for guardians in similar situations. Would you be open to that?" Mr. Harris hesitated, his pride warring with his exhaustion. Finally, he let out a long breath and nodded. "Maybe. I don't know. I just want what's best for her, but I don't know if I'm the right person to do that." "You're doing the best you can," Officer Stevens said reassuringly. "And that's what matters. But it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you care enough to do what's best for Lisa. Mr. Harris swallowed hard, the emotion evident in his voice. I'll think about that. The next day, Sam woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. He couldn't shake the image of Lisa's sad eyes from his mind, and the thought of her going back to that park bench, to that same strained life with her uncle, weighed heavily on him. Though the police had intervened, Sam couldn't help but feel that things weren't as simple as they seemed. He felt a strange sense of responsibility, as if by noticing Lisa's distress, he had been pulled into her world, and now he couldn't turn away. At school, Sam found it hard to focus. During recess, instead of joining his friends for a game of soccer, he wandered over to a group of kids who were talking near the swings. He recognized one of them, a boy named Josh, who he knew lived near the park and often saw the people who frequented it. "Hey, Josh," Sam said, trying to sound casual as he approached. "You know that girl who's always at the park? The one with the older guy?" Josh looked up, surprised. "Yeah, that's Lisa. Why?" Sam hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I saw something weird the other day, and the police came to check on her. Do you know anything about her? Like, what's going on with her and that man?" Josh's expression grew serious, and he lowered his voice as he replied, "Yeah, I've seen her around. She used to be really cheerful, always playing and smiling. But ever since her parents died, she's changed a lot. She's quiet now, and she never plays anymore. Just sits on that bench with her uncle." Sam's heart sank. What happened to her parents? "Car accident," Josh said simply, his voice somber. "She was living with them, and then one day they were gone. I heard her uncle took her in after that, but he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who knows how to take care of a kid, you know?" Sam nodded, feeling the weight of Josh's words. It made sense now. The sadness in Lisa's eyes, the way she seemed so lost and alone. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to lose your parents and then be thrust into the care of someone who didn't know how to comfort you. "Thanks, Josh," Sam said quietly. "I just wanted to know. I'm worried about her." Josh shrugged. "Yeah, a lot of people are, but there's not much we can do, right?" Sam didn't respond, but his mind was racing. Maybe there was something more he could do. The police had stepped in, but what if that wasn't enough? He needed to talk to someone who could help him figure out what to do next. That evening, Sam sat on the edge of his sister Emily's bed, his hands fidgeting in his lap. Emily was 6 years older than him and worked as a counselor at a local community center. She had always been the one Sam went to when he needed advice, and today was no different. Emily looked up from the book she was reading and noticed the troubled expression on Sam's face. She set the book aside and gave him her full attention. "What's on your mind, Sam? You look like you've got something heavy weighing on you." Sam took a deep breath, then told her everything about the girl at the park, the hand signal, the police visit, and what he had learned from Josh. As he spoke, Emily listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When he finished, Emily sat quietly for a moment, processing what he had told her. "It sounds like you're really worried about this girl, and I can see why," she said gently. "It's hard to see someone in pain and not know how to help." Sam nodded, his eyes filled with concern. I feel like it's not enough. The police talked to her, but what if things are still bad? What if she's still scared?" Emily thought for a moment, then reached out to place a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're right to be concerned, Sam. But you've already done something really important by getting the police involved. That was a big step. Now, it might be time to talk to them again, to see if they can do more." Sam looked at her, hopeful but unsure. "You think they'll listen to me again?" "I think they will," Emily said confidently. "And if you want, I can go with you. We can talk to them together and make sure they understand that Lisa needs more support. Maybe we can even connect her with some services that can help her and her uncle." Sam felt a sense of relief at Emily's words. Having her on his side made him feel less alone, like he was doing the right thing. "That sounds like a good idea. I just want her to be okay." Emily smiled warmly. "I know you do, and we'll do everything we can to make sure she is." The next day, Sam and Emily went to the local police station after school. The building was a short walk from their house, and Sam's nervousness grew with each step they took. But Emily's presence beside him gave him the courage he needed. When they arrived, they were greeted by Officer Martinez, the same officer who had spoken to Lisa at the park. She recognized Sam immediately and gave him a kind smile as she led them to a small, private room where they could talk. "What can I do for you today, Sam?" Officer Martinez asked as they sat down. Sam glanced at Emily, who nodded encouragingly, then turned back to Officer Martinez. "I'm still worried about Lisa," he admitted. "I know you talked to her and her uncle, but I think there's more going on. My sister, and I wanted to see if there's anything else we can do to help." Officer Martinez listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "I understand your concern, Sam. It's clear that you care a lot about Lisa, and that's important. We did have a conversation with her and her uncle, and we're keeping an eye on the situation. But sometimes these things take time. It's not always easy to get to the bottom of what's really going on." Emily leaned forward slightly. "Is there any way we can connect them with some additional support? I work as a counselor, and I know that in situations like this, getting the right help early on can make a big difference." Officer Martinez nodded slowly, considering Emily's suggestion. "That's a good idea. We could definitely reach out to social services and see if they can provide some counseling or support for both Lisa and her uncle. It might help them work through some of the issues they're facing." Sam felt a sense of hope growing inside him. "Do you think that will make things better for her?" "It could," Officer Martinez said with a reassuring smile. "It's not a quick fix, but it's a step in the right direction. And sometimes that's all you can do. Take things one step at a time." Emily squeezed Sam's hand gently. "We'll keep checking in too. If there's anything else we could do to help, we'll be here." Officer Martinez nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, both of you. It's not often that we see this level of concern and involvement from the community. It really does make a difference." While Sam and Emily were taking action, the neighborhood around them was buzzing with rumors. Word of the police visit to the park had spread quickly, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about it. Some of the neighbors were genuinely concerned for Lisa, wondering if she was okay and if her uncle was treating her right. Others were more critical, blaming Mr. Harris for not being able to handle his responsibilities. In the small grocery store where Mr. Harris often shopped, whispers followed him down the aisles. People who once greeted him with a nod or a smile now gave him sideways glances, their expressions a mix of pity and judgment. It was clear that the news had spread, and not in a way that made Mr. Harris feel supported. At first, Mr. Harris tried to ignore the stares and the muttered comments. He kept his head down, focusing on getting his errands done and getting out of the store as quickly as possible. But the more it happened, the more it got under his skin. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the silent accusations in their looks. One afternoon, as he was leaving the store with a bag of groceries, a woman he barely knew approached him. She had a concerned expression on her face, but her tone was sharp when she spoke. "Mr. Harris, is everything all right with your niece?" she asked, her voice laced with concern that didn't quite hide the judgment underneath. "People have been talking, and we're all worried about her." Mr. Harris stiffened, the defensiveness he had felt with the police flaring up again. "Everything's fine," he replied curtly, trying to keep his temper in check. "Lisa's my responsibility, and I'm taking care of her. I don't need anyone else telling me how to do that." The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Well, if you ever need help, there are people in the community who are more than willing to step in. It's not easy raising a child on your own." Mr. Harris clenched his jaw, his frustration boiling over. "I'm not raising her on my own," he snapped. "I'm doing the best I can with what I have, and I don't need anyone else's pity or help. Now, if you'll excuse me." He turned and walked away, his fists clenched tightly around the handles of the grocery bag. But as he headed home, the words of the woman echoed in his mind. They weren't the first he had heard, and he knew they wouldn't be the last. The weight of the community's judgment was starting to feel unbearable, and it made him want to retreat even further into his own world. When Mr. Harris got home, he found Lisa sitting quietly at the kitchen table, working on her homework. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, their eyes met. He could see the fear and uncertainty in her gaze, and it made his heart ache. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be all right, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he just nodded to her and went to put the groceries away. Lisa watched him silently, her heart heavy with worry. She could sense that things were getting worse, not better, and she didn't know what to do about it. The next day, Emily decided to visit the park after work to see if she could find Lisa and talk to her. She knew that sometimes children found it easier to open up to someone who wasn't directly involved in their lives, and she hoped that maybe Lisa would feel comfortable enough to share her feelings with her. When Emily arrived at the park, she spotted Lisa sitting on the same bench where Sam had first seen her. Mr. Harris was there too, standing a few feet away, his expression as closed off as ever. Emily approached them cautiously, not wanting to startle either of them. "Hi there," she said softly as she reached the bench. "Lisa, right? My name's Emily. I'm Sam's sister." Lisa looked up at her with wide eyes, surprised but curious. "You're Sam's sister?" Emily smiled and nodded. "Yep. He's told me a lot about you. He's really worried about you, you know. He wants to make sure you're okay." Lisa glanced at Mr. Harris, who was watching them with a wary expression. Emily could see the tension in his posture, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. She turned back to Lisa and sat down on the bench beside her. "I know things have been really tough for you," Emily continued, her voice gentle. "Losing your parents, moving in with your uncle, it's a lot for anyone to handle. But you're not alone in this. There are people who want to help, if you'll let them." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly looked away, trying to hide her emotions. But Emily could see how much the girl was hurting, how much she needed someone to reach out to her. "I'm a counselor," Emily said, hoping to build some trust. "I work with kids who are going through tough times just like you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. You don't have to go through this alone." Mr. Harris stepped forward, his expression hardening. "We're fine," he said gruffly. "Lisa doesn't need any more strangers interfering in her life. We're managing just fine." Emily met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not here to interfere, Mr. Harris. I'm here to offer support. Raising a child is hard, especially under these circumstances. But there are people who can help you, who can make this a little easier for both of you." Mr. Harris's expression faltered, and for a moment, Emily thought he might actually listen. But then he shook his head, his walls going back up. "I appreciate the offer, but we're fine. We don't need any more help." Emily sighed inwardly, but didn't push further. "All right, but if you ever change your mind, I'm here. And so are a lot of other people who care about you, and Lisa." Lisa watched the exchange silently, her emotions a whirlwind inside her. She wanted to believe that things could get better, that there were people who cared about her and wanted to help. But she also felt a deep loyalty to her uncle, who had taken her in when no one else would. She didn't want to hurt him, but she also didn't want to keep feeling so lost and alone. As Emily left the park, she glanced back at Lisa and Mr. Harris. She couldn't help but feel a pang of worry, knowing that they were still so isolated, still struggling to find their way. But she also knew that change didn't happen overnight. It took time, and sometimes it took more than one attempt to break through the walls people built around themselves. Emily was determined not to give up on them, and she knew Sam felt the same way. They would keep trying, keep reaching out, until they found a way to help Lisa and her uncle heal. That evening, as Sam and Emily sat together in the living room, they talked about what had happened at the park. Sam listened intently as Emily described her conversation with Lisa and Mr. Harris, his concern growing with every word. "So they didn't really want help?" Sam asked, disappointment clear in his voice. Emily shook her head gently. "Not yet, but that doesn't mean they won't. Sometimes, it takes a while for people to accept that they need help. It's not easy to admit when you're struggling, especially when you're trying to be strong for someone else." Sam nodded, understanding but still worried. "I just want Lisa to be happy again. She doesn't deserve to feel like this." "I know," Emily said softly, "and we'll keep doing what we can to help her. We won't give up on her, Sam. I promise." Sam felt a small sense of relief at Emily's words. He knew that as long as they kept trying, there was hope for Lisa and her uncle. It might take time, but he was willing to be patient. After all, helping someone heal wasn't a race. It was a journey, one that they would take together. As the night drew to a close, Sam went to bed with a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew that he was doing the right thing by caring, by not turning away when things got tough. And in the end, that was what mattered most. The following days passed slowly, each one filled with the weight of concern for Lisa and her uncle. Sam continued to think about them, wondering how they were doing, if things were getting any better. He talked to Emily often, asking if she had heard anything new, but there was little to report. But even in the silence, Sam held on to hope. He knew that change didn't happen overnight, but he believed that with time, things could get better. And until they did, he would keep caring, keep watching, and keep being there for Lisa in whatever way he could. Because sometimes, the greatest help you could offer someone was simply to let them know that they weren't alone. It was the 5th day since Sam and Emily had last seen Lisa, and tensions were mounting. Mr. Harris, struggling under the weight of his responsibilities and the unrelenting scrutiny from the community, found himself at his breaking point. The pressure seemed to push him further into a corner, and he was finding it increasingly difficult to manage his emotions. One evening, as dusk fell over the small town, Mr. Harris's frustration boiled over. He had come home from a particularly stressful day, feeling the sting of judgmental eyes and whispered conversations that seemed to follow him everywhere. The groceries he had brought home were left untouched on the kitchen counter as he paced back and forth, the tension evident in his every movement. Lisa, who had been trying to keep a low profile, was doing her homework at the kitchen table. The quiet clicking of her pen on the paper was suddenly shattered by Mr. Harris's sharp voice. "Why can't you just stay out of my way?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the small apartment. "I'm doing everything I can, and it's never enough for you." Lisa flinched at his outburst, her eyes wide with fear. She had learned to tread carefully around Mr. Harris's volatile moods, but today, his anger seemed more intense than usual. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm just trying to finish my homework." Mr. Harris's eyes flashed with irritation. "Homework? You think that's all there is to life? There's so much more going on, and all you do is sit there and be a burden." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she tried to hold back her sobs. She knew that Mr. Harris was struggling, but the harsh words and the frustration in his voice were too much for her to bear. She felt a familiar wave of hopelessness wash over her. Unable to stand it any longer, Lisa grabbed her jacket and bolted from the apartment, leaving Mr. Harris standing in stunned silence. The door slammed behind her, and she ran down the street, her heart pounding in her chest. The chill of the evening air did little to calm her racing thoughts as she fled toward the park. At the park, Sam was kicking a soccer ball around, trying to clear his mind after a long day at school. The park, which had become a place of concern for him, was now a place where he hoped to find some solace. But as he glanced up from his game, he noticed a figure darting past the playground. His heart skipped a beat when he recognized Lisa, her face tear-streaked and her movements frantic. Without thinking, Sam dropped the ball and took off in her direction. He knew that something was wrong, and he felt a surge of urgency to help. "Lisa!" he called out, but she didn't seem to hear him over her own distress. Sam ran after her, his breath coming in short gasps as he tried to keep up. He followed her to the playground, where Lisa had stopped to hide behind a slide. Her shoulders were shaking with sobs, and her hands were clutching her knees tightly. Sam approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Lisa, it's me, Sam," he said softly. "Are you okay? What happened?" Lisa looked up, her eyes red and puffy. She hesitated for a moment, then burst into tears. "I couldn't take it anymore. Uncle Harris is so angry all the time, and I didn't know where else to go." Sam's heart ached for her. He knew that something needed to be done, and quickly. "We need to get you some help," he said gently. "I'm going to call Emily. She can help us figure out what to do next." Lisa nodded, her tears slowing as she tried to compose herself. Sam pulled out his phone and dialed Emily's number, his hands shaking slightly. "Emily, it's Sam," he said when she answered. "Lisa's here at the park, and she's really upset. Something happened, and she ran away from home. We need to do something right now." Emily's voice was calm and reassuring. "We'll come right over. Just stay with Lisa and keep her safe until we get there." Within minutes, Emily arrived at the park. She found Lisa huddled on the playground, her face buried in her hands. Emily knelt down beside her, speaking in a soothing tone. "Lisa, it's okay. We're here to help you. Do you want to come with us to the police station? They can make sure you're safe and get you the support you need." Lisa looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears away. "Okay, I just want to be safe." Emily offered her hand, and Lisa took it gratefully. Sam walked alongside them as they made their way to the police station, the urgency of the situation driving them forward. At the police station, Officer Martinez greeted them warmly, her professional demeanor providing a sense of calm. She led them to a quiet room where they could talk privately. Lisa sat on one side of the table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sam and Emily sat beside her, their presence a comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. "Lisa, can you tell me what happened?" Officer Martinez asked gently. Lisa took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she began to speak. "Uncle Harris was really angry. He yelled at me and said mean things. I felt so scared, and I didn't know what to do. I just ran away." Officer Martinez listened carefully, nodding as Lisa spoke. When she finished, Officer Martinez turned to Sam and Emily. "Thank you for bringing Lisa here. It's clear that she's been through a lot, and we need to make sure she's safe." Emily spoke up, her voice firm and supportive. "Lisa needs temporary care while her uncle gets the help he needs. I work as a counselor, and I believe that with the right support, both Lisa and her uncle can work through this." Officer Martinez nodded in agreement. "We'll arrange for Lisa to be placed in temporary foster care. In the meantime, we'll reach out to social services to provide Mr. Harris with the support he needs. It's important that he gets the help for his anger and stress issues." Lisa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I just want things to be better." The days that followed Lisa's escape to the park were filled with a whirlwind of activity and emotion. For Lisa, it was a time of adjustment and uncertainty as she settled into her temporary foster home. For Mr. Harris, it was a period of intense self-reflection and struggle as he began to confront the issues that had led to this crisis. And for Sam and Emily, it was a journey of continued support and advocacy as they remained committed to helping Lisa and her uncle through this difficult time. Lisa's new foster family, the Johnsons, were experienced in caring for children who had been through trauma. They provided her with a stable, nurturing environment where she could begin to feel safe again. Mrs. Johnson, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes, made sure Lisa had her own space in their home, a cozy bedroom decorated with soft pastels and filled with books and stuffed animals. On her first night there, Lisa sat on the edge of her new bed, her fingers tracing the pattern on the quilt. Mrs. Johnson knocked softly on the open door. "How are you settling in, Lisa?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. Lisa looked up, her eyes still holding a mixture of fear and hope. "It's nice," she said hesitantly. "Thank you for letting me stay here." Mrs. Johnson smiled and sat down next to her. "We're glad you're here, Lisa. I know this is all very new and probably a little scary, but I want you to know that you're safe here. And we're here to help you in any way we can." Lisa nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to this kind of gentle care, and it made her realize just how much she had been missing it. Do you know what's going to happen to Uncle Harris?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Johnson put a comforting hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Your uncle is getting help too, sweetie. He's talking to people who can help him learn to manage his anger and stress better. The goal is for both of you to heal and eventually be reunited, but only when it's safe and healthy for you both." Lisa nodded again, her eyes filling with tears. Despite everything that had happened, she still cared about her uncle and wanted things to get better. Mrs. Johnson pulled her into a gentle hug, letting Lisa cry out some of the emotions she had been holding back for so long. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris was facing his own challenges. The day after Lisa had run away, he found himself sitting in a small, comfortable office, face-to-face with a counselor named Dr. Martinez. The walls were adorned with calming landscapes, and a small fountain bubbled quietly in the corner. But Mr. Harris felt anything but calm. "Mr. Harris," Dr. Martinez began, his voice steady and non-judgmental. "Can you tell me about what happened yesterday?" Mr. Harris shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. I lost control," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "I yelled at Lisa, said things I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to scare her so badly that she'd run away. Dr. Martinez nodded, jotting down a few notes. It sounds like you're dealing with a lot of stress and anger. Can you tell me more about that? Mr. Harris took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. Ever since my sister and her husband died, everything's been a mess. I never wanted to be a parent, never thought I'd have to be. And now suddenly I'm responsible for this little girl who's been through so much, and I don't know how to help her. I don't even know how to help myself. As Mr. Harris spoke, Dr. Martinez listened attentively, occasionally asking gentle questions to encourage him to open up further. By the end of the session, Mr. Harris felt drained, but also, surprisingly, a little lighter. It was the first time he had really talked about everything he had been feeling since Lisa came to live with him. Mr. Harris, Dr. Martinez said as their time was coming to an end, what happened yesterday was a wake-up call. But the fact that you're here, that you're willing to talk about these issues, is a crucial first step. We're going to work together to help you manage your stress and anger and to develop the skills you need to be the guardian Lisa needs. Mr. Harris nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. I want to do better, he said quietly. For Lisa and for myself. Over the next few weeks, both Lisa and Mr. Harris began their journeys of healing and growth. Lisa started attending therapy sessions with a child psychologist who specialized in trauma and grief counseling. At first, Lisa was hesitant to open up, but her therapist, Dr. Sarah, used play therapy and art to help Lisa express her feelings in a way that felt safe and natural. During one session, Lisa was drawing a picture of her family. Dr. Sarah noticed that she had drawn herself standing between her parents, but Mr. Harris was off to the side, separated by a line. Can you tell me about this drawing, Lisa? Dr. Sarah asked gently. Lisa looked at her picture, her crayon hovering over the paper. That's me with Mom and Dad, she said softly. And that's Uncle Harris over there. I see. Dr. Sarah nodded. And why is Uncle Harris separated by this line? Lisa was quiet for a moment, then said, Because I don't know if he really wants me. He gets so angry sometimes, and I feel like I'm just in the way. Dr. Sarah listened carefully, then asked, How does that make you feel, Lisa? Sad, Lisa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And scared. I miss Mom and Dad so much, and I want Uncle Harris to love me like they did, but I don't think he knows how. This session marked a turning point for Lisa. As she continued to work with Dr. Sarah, she began to process her grief over losing her parents and her complicated feelings about her uncle. Slowly but surely, she started to regain her confidence and her ability to trust. Mr. Harris, for his part, was making progress in his own therapy sessions. He attended both individual counseling with Dr. Martinez and group therapy sessions for people dealing with anger management issues. In these sessions, he learned techniques for recognizing his anger triggers and managing his stress in healthier ways. One day, during a group session, Mr. Harris shared a breakthrough he had experienced. I realized something this week, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I've been so focused on what I lost when my sister died, my freedom, my simple life, that I didn't see what I gained. I gained Lisa. She's not a burden. She's family. And I need to start treating her that way. The group leader nodded encouragingly. That's a powerful realization, Mr. Harris. How do you think this change in perspective might affect your interactions with Lisa? Mr. Harris thought for a moment. I think I need to start seeing things from her perspective. She's lost so much, and instead of being angry at her for needing me, I need to be there for her. I need to learn how to be the support she needs. As Mr. Harris continued to work on himself, he also started taking parenting classes to learn more about how to care for a child who had experienced trauma. He began to understand the importance of consistency, patience, and showing affection, all things that hadn't come naturally to him before. Throughout this process, Sam and Emily remained steadfast in their support. They visited Lisa regularly at her foster home, bringing her books and small gifts to let her know they were thinking of her. Sam would often bring his soccer ball, and they would kick it around in the Johnsons' backyard, Lisa's laughter gradually becoming more frequent and genuine. Emily, with her background in counseling, became a valuable resource for both Lisa and Mr. Harris. She worked closely with the social workers assigned to their case, offering insights and suggestions based on her observations. One afternoon, as Sam and Emily were leaving after a visit with Lisa, Mrs. Johnson pulled them aside. "I want to thank you both," she said warmly. "Your consistent presence in Lisa's life has been so important. She lights up when you visit, and I can see how much it means to her to have friends who care about her." Sam smiled, feeling a sense of pride and purpose. "We just want to help," he said simply. "Lisa deserves to be happy." Emily nodded in agreement. "We're committed to supporting both Lisa and Mr. Harris through this process. They've both been through so much, and they need a strong support system to help them heal and rebuild their relationship." As the weeks passed, Lisa and Mr. Harris began to have supervised visits. These meetings were initially tense and awkward, with both of them unsure how to interact with each other. But as they continued their individual therapy and worked with a family counselor, their interactions slowly began to improve. During one of these visits, Mr. Harris brought a photo album he had found while cleaning out his sister's old things. Lisa's eyes widened when she saw it, and they spent the next hour looking through photos of her parents and sharing memories. "I remember this day," Lisa said, pointing to a picture of her mother pushing her on a swing. "Mom always pushed me so high, and I felt like I could touch the sky." Mr. Harris smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Your mom loved those moments with you. She used to tell me all about your adventures in the park." Lisa looked up at her uncle, curiosity in her eyes. "You and Mom were close?" Mr. Harris nodded. "We were. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we loved each other. And she loved you more than anything in the world, Lisa." For a moment, they sat in silence, both lost in memories. Then Mr. Harris took a deep breath and said, "Lisa, I want you to know that I'm trying to do better. I'm sorry for the way I treated you before. You deserve so much more than that, and I want to be the kind of uncle you can count on." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in a long while, they were tears of hope rather than sadness. "I want that too, Uncle Harris," she said softly. It was a small moment, but an important one. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, one built on understanding, forgiveness, and the desire to create a real family bond. As Lisa and Mr. Harris continued to make progress, the social workers and therapists involved in their case began to discuss the possibility of reunification. However, they were careful to move slowly, wanting to ensure that both Lisa and Mr. Harris were truly ready for this step. One day, about 2 months after Lisa had first run away to the park, a meeting was called to discuss the next steps. Lisa, Mr. Harris, the Johnsons, Sam, Emily, and the various professionals involved in their case all gathered in a conference room at the social services office. Lisa sat between Mrs. Johnson and Sam, drawing comfort from their presence. Mr. Harris sat across from her, looking nervous but determined. The social worker assigned to their case, Ms. Thompson, led the meeting. "We've seen significant progress from both Lisa and Mr. Harris over the past 2 months," Ms. Thompson began. "Lisa has shown great resilience in her therapy sessions and has been thriving in her foster placement. Mr. Harris has demonstrated a strong commitment to addressing his anger issues and learning positive parenting skills." She turned to Lisa. "Lisa, how do you feel about the idea of eventually returning to live with your uncle?" Lisa looked at Mr. Harris, then back at Ms. Thompson. I think I'd like that," she said hesitantly. "Things are better now when we visit. Uncle Harris doesn't get angry like he used to, and we can talk about Mom and Dad without it being sad all the time." Ms. Thompson nodded encouragingly, then addressed Mr. Harris. "And Mr. Harris, how do you feel about Lisa potentially coming back home?" Mr. Harris took a deep breath. "I want Lisa to come home," he said, his voice steady. "But I want to make sure I'm really ready to take care of her the way she deserves. I've learned a lot these past couple of months, and I know I still have more to learn. But I'm committed to being the guardian Lisa needs." The meeting continued, with everyone contributing their thoughts and concerns. In the end, it was decided that they would begin a gradual transition process. Lisa would start spending more time with Mr. Harris, including overnight visits, while continuing to live primarily with the Johnsons. This arrangement would allow them to rebuild their relationship in a safe, supported environment. Over the next few weeks, Lisa began spending more time at Mr. Harris's apartment. They worked together to redecorate her room, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and putting up posters of her favorite animals. Mr. Harris made sure to create a study space for her, complete with a desk and a small bookshelf. During one of these visits, as they were arranging books on the new shelf, Lisa came across a framed photo of her parents. She picked it up, running her fingers gently over the glass. "I miss them so much," she said quietly. Mr. Harris put down the book he was holding and sat down next to her. "I miss them too," he said. "Your mom was my little sister, you know? We used to argue all the time when we were kids, but as we got older, we became really close." Lisa looked up at him, curiosity in her eyes. "Really? What was Mom like when she was little?" Mr. Harris chuckled. "Oh, she was a firecracker, always getting into trouble, but with a heart of gold. You remind me of her sometimes, you know?" For the next hour, they sat on the floor of Lisa's new room, looking through old photos and sharing stories. It was a moment of connection that neither of them had experienced before, and it felt like a turning point in their relationship. As Lisa spent more time with Mr. Harris, Sam and Emily continued to be a constant presence in her life. They would often visit during her stays at Mr. Harris's apartment, bringing games or movies to enjoy together. One Saturday afternoon, they all decided to have a picnic in the park, the same park where this journey had begun. As they spread out a blanket under a large oak tree, Lisa couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. "It's kind of weird being back here," she said, looking around at the familiar playground and benches. Sam nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but in a good way, right? Look how far we've all come." Mr. Harris, who was unpacking the picnic basket, paused and looked at Lisa. "You know, Lisa, I never properly thanked Sam for what he did that day. If he hadn't noticed you were in trouble and gotten help, who knows where we'd be now." Lisa smiled at Sam, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Yeah, thank you, Sam. You're a real hero." Sam blushed, shaking his head. "I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone would do if they saw someone who needed help." Emily ruffled her brother's hair affectionately. "Maybe, but not everyone would have had the courage to speak up and keep pushing until something was done. You should be proud of yourself, Sam." As they enjoyed their picnic, laughing and talking under the warm sun, Lisa felt a sense of peace wash over her. She looked at the people around her, her uncle, who was trying so hard to be better, Sam and Emily, who had become like family to her, and even Mrs. Johnson, who had come along to support her during this outing. For the first time in a long while, Lisa felt like she truly belonged. The transition process continued over the next few months, with Lisa gradually spending more time at Mr. Harris's apartment. There were still challenges to overcome, moments when old tensions would flare up or when the weight of their shared loss would become overwhelming. But with the support of their therapists and the unwavering presence of Sam and Emily, they worked through each obstacle. Finally, after nearly 6 months of hard work and healing, the day came when Lisa was ready to move back in with Mr. Harris permanently. It was a bittersweet moment for everyone involved. The Johnsons, who had become like a second family to Lisa, hugged her tightly as she prepared to leave their home. "You're always welcome here, Lisa," Mrs. Johnson said, her eyes glistening with tears. "We're so proud of how far you've come." Lisa hugged her back, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness about the future. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. As they drove to Mr. Harris's apartment, now their shared home, Lisa felt a sense of coming full circle. She remembered the fear and uncertainty she had felt when she first came to live with her uncle, and marveled at how different things were now. Mr. Harris seemed to sense her thoughts. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said, glancing at her as he drove. Lisa nodded. "Yeah, we have. I'm glad we didn't give up on each other." Mr. Harris reached over and squeezed her hand. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." The story of Lisa and Mr. Harris didn't end with their reunification, of course. They still had challenges to face and a relationship to continue building. But they now had the tools and support system to face these challenges together. Sam and Emily continued to visit regularly, their friendship with Lisa growing stronger. Sam often joined Lisa for activities at the park, their shared moments of laughter and camaraderie serving as a reminder of their enduring bond. Emily, as a counselor, provided guidance and resources for both Lisa and Mr. Harris, helping them navigate any difficulties that arose. One day, as they sat together in the park, Sam turned to Lisa with a thoughtful expression. I'm really proud of how far you've come. It's been amazing to see you become more confident and happy. Lisa smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the sun. I couldn't have done it without you and Emily. And Mr. Harris, too. He's really trying his best. Mr. Harris, who had joined them for the afternoon, looked at Lisa with a mix of pride and affection. It's been a tough road, but I'm grateful for every step we've taken together. We've learned a lot, and I'm committed to being the best guardian I can be. The scene in the park was a testament to their progress. Lisa and Mr. Harris were no longer just trying to make it through each day. They were actively building a future together, one filled with hope and new possibilities. The support of their friends and the community had played a crucial role in this transformation, proving that positive change was indeed possible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, Sam, Lisa, and Mr. Harris sat together, enjoying the peaceful end to a day filled with laughter and connection. It was a moment of reflection and gratitude, a reminder of the strength and resilience they had found in each other. The journey was far from over, and they knew there would be more challenges ahead. But with their newfound tools, support system, and unwavering determination, they were ready to face whatever came their way. The story of Lisa and Mr. Harris was one of redemption, growth, and the power of human connection, a story that would continue to evolve as they embraced their new beginning together. And so, with the park as their backdrop and the promise of a brighter future ahead, they looked forward to the days to come, confident that they had the strength and support to overcome any obstacles and build a life filled with love, understanding, and hope. What would you do if you were in Sam's shoes, discovering something troubling and deciding to take action that leads to a life-changing outcome for someone in need? Would you have acted with the same courage and empathy, or would you have approached the situation differently? If you found this story of bravery, compassion, and the impact of standing up for what's right compelling, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put a lot of effort into crafting these impactful narratives, and your support truly means the world to me. Thank you for being a part of this journey.